Hello, welcome to our weekly Parsha class, Parshas Nasso. Hope everyone's having a nice day. So there's a lot going on in this week's Parsha. This is actually the longest Parsha when it's not a double Parsha. Very, very long, so there's a lot to talk about. I'd like to start at the beginning. First, the Parsha talks about, around the beginning, talks about the SOTA. SOTA is a very interesting Parsha in the Torah. If a woman was suspected by her husband of committing adultery, and he warns her not to hang around a certain man, and she doesn't listen, she still does it, there was something that was done called the SOTA procedure, which had very specific rules, where the woman was brought into the temple, and she was made to drink a certain drink, which contained the name of Hashem, which was destroyed and put in this drink, and she would drink it, and if she was guilty, meaning she committed adultery, she would die, a miraculous death, and the person she committed adultery with would also die. And if she was innocent, she would receive blessings and everything would be great. Now, it's interesting that they take a parchment with God's name on it. We know how serious in Judaism we teach the holiness of God's name. Right? If you have God's name, you can't erase it. I know a rabbi who met somebody who wanted to do something holy, so he got God's holy name tattooed on his chest, and he told him, you can't take a shower, you have to cover yourself when you go in the shower, you can't take that off. Very serious thing. But here, we purposely write God's name in order to destroy it. Why? Because of the importance of shalom bayis, meaning this husband and wife aren't getting along, he suspects her of committing adultery, and if this miraculous procedure will demonstrate that she's innocent, or if she's not innocent, but it will solve the problem, it will make shalom bayis. That harmony, marital harmony between a man and a wife is so important that we will erase God's holy name, which is something we're usually extremely stringent about. Right. Similarly, we have there's a rule. If you only have enough money for Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, you buy Shabbos candles. The reason is because Shabbos candles are made for shalom bayis, because if there's no light in the home on Shabbos, people are going to bump into each other, and the husband and wife will get into fights. So shalom bayis is even more important to get Shabbos candles to prevent that from happening, to get along with one spouse, than it is to get Hanukkah candles. The Torah puts an extreme emphasis on not just getting along with each other, but especially that a husband and wife should get along and that there should be peace in the home, because the home is the vehicle which transmits the values of Judaism to the next generation. That's how Hashem made it, that the best way to transfer values is with parents and their children, and it's very important. It's maybe one of the reasons, but there's many obvious reasons why it's very important that a husband and wife get along. Now, after the Parsha talks about SOTA, the Chumash goes in to discuss Nazir. Now, Nazir was a person who wanted to do more than what was required by Judaism. So he would take certain oaths upon himself, take a certain oath, a Nazirite oath. Now, what this meant was that he would keep certain restrictions that every other Jew is not required to keep. For example, he wouldn't drink wine, he would let his hair grow, didn't cut his hair, he wouldn't come in contact with the dead, he or she. And it was for somebody who wanted to take on extra stringencies to live a holier life. We're learning now once a week, Mesil Shasharm, the path of the just, and there are many levels that are discussed about how to get closer to Hashem and how to serve Hashem in the best way possible. And we see there that it's not just, it's not all or nothing. It's not like you fulfill all the commandments and that's all you do, then you're done, like you're at the highest level you can achieve. Even once you're fulfilling all the commandments, there's levels you can go beyond. You can even distance yourself from the physical in order to live a more spiritual life, something called Parshas. We haven't gone up to that chapter yet, but that's where you take certain things that are permitted. It's permitted to eat cake, but the Torah doesn't look, it's not considered a good trait, someone who's running around the whole day just trying to eat cake and finding good foods. Hashem wants us to focus on the spiritual. Now, it's not a prohibition to eat cake, but there's a certain level of holiness where a person is holding on a level and he wants to grow even closer to Hashem, so he distances himself from those things which are permitted. And that's what the Nazir does. Now Rashi says a very interesting thing, or before that, so after we have this Parsha of SOTA, we have the Parsha of Nazir. So there's no coincidence why the Torah puts certain mitzvos in certain orders. So what is the reason that the Torah describes Nazir right after SOTA? So Rashi says in 6:2, chapter 6, verse number 2. Yafresh lama nismecha Parshas Nazir Parshas SOTA. Why does the Torah put Nazir next to SOTA? Lomer lacha shekol haro SOTA b'kukula. Someone who saw the SOTA procedure, Yazar atzmo min yain, should become a Nazir shehu mevi li diniv, because it could bring to immorality. So someone who sees the SOTA procedure should make himself a Nazir. Now, as we mentioned, SOTA, it was a miraculous thing. In fact, the Rambam writes over here in 5:20 that the SOTA procedure only worked when the Jewish people were on a very high spiritual level, because the thing is miraculous, right? The lady is drinking this mixture, and if she's guilty, she's miraculously going to die. The reason that it's only when the Jewish people are on a high spiritual level is because it's a schus. God deals with us on a supernatural level when we go above and beyond and try to be close to Him. But meaning, if the husband is, let's say, an immoral person, then the SOTA procedure doesn't work. Or if the Jewish people aren't on a high level, the SOTA procedure doesn't work. So someone who sees this, right, he's basically seeing a miracle. He's seeing God punishing somebody because they did something wrong, and it's a direct punishment. Can you imagine how say inspirational is that we would rethink our values if every time somebody sinned, he would get struck by lightning, right? Miraculously. Can you imagine? Imagine how different our lives would be and how our mindsets would change if something like that happened. So somebody who was at this SOTA procedure witnessed something which was truly miraculous, something that only works when the Jewish people are on a high level. So what should he do after seeing that? He should become a Nazir. So many say the reason is that when you see something, when you're inspired and you get turned on to spirituality, turned on to Judaism, you have to take that spirituality and inspiration and do something with it. You can't just be inspired and let it go. You have to do something with it. So what does this guy do who sees the SOTA? He goes and becomes a Nazir. He takes that vow where he goes above and beyond what's required of a normal Jewish person and does things which are extra, which is closer to get to Hashem. Because any time when we're inspired, when we all have moments of inspiration, we'll hear an inspirational speech, or we'll have moments in our lives where we're influenced to change. We have to take that inspiration and do something with it. And usually, if we don't do anything with it, it's often worse than if we hadn't had the moment of inspiration. If we get inspired and just ignore it, we become jaded and we become cynical, and it becomes harder and harder to inspire us. So we have to do something practically, just like someone who sees the SOTA becomes a Nazir, to take that inspirational procedure which he saw and do something with it. So too, that's what we have to do. There's a famous story of a dibuk. A dibuk is it's a real thing. It's a spiritual force, a negative spiritual force. And in Europe, times of the Chafetz Chaim, there was a dibuk in a young girl, and it was a miraculous thing. And the Chafetz Chaim was able to get the dibuk out, this negative spiritual force. Like, it was really like an exorcism, and the whole town was talking about it. So I heard one of the rabbis said, what was it like? The whole town must have changed after that. And he said, no. He said, people didn't really, they didn't take the inspiration. They didn't do anything with it. It was like, wow, that's amazing. You can have two people go through an experience. For one person, it'll change their life, and to other people, it doesn't do anything. You had the 6-day war, where many people, Israel miraculously in 6 days defeated all of her enemies on 6 sides, all sides of her, all the Arab countries, and a lot of people took that and became more religious and started observing more Torah and mitzvahs. They recognized the hand of God in saving the Jewish people. But some people didn't do anything. It all depends how we react. So now, we just had Sfiras HaOmer. We were working on our Torah learning and working on getting closer to Hashem. Maybe we were inspired doing Shavuos. It's a time to take that inspiration and to make practical commitments of how we're going to change our lives and how we're going to get closer to Hashem. You even look at the current pandemic now, how certain people react. Some people have used it to get closer to Hashem and to rethink their values and rethink what we're doing here. And some people just ignore it. But we have to be those people that are inspired and do something with the situation that's happening. Okay, just want to talk about one more topic in the Parsha. So at the end of the Parsha, we have the inauguration of the Mizbeach, of the tabernacle. That's the collapsible building that the Jewish people took around with them in the desert, and each of the princes of each tribe brought a sacrifice to inaugurate the tabernacle. Now, if you read it, it's very interesting, because there were 12 tribes and there were 12 princes. So it starts off by describing exactly what the what the offering was. It was a silver bowl, it weighed this much, and had this many shekels of incense, and a bull and a ram and a sheep, and that's it. And then that's the first, what the first prince brought. And then the second prince brought the same thing, except that the Torah goes through and describes exactly and repeats exactly what the first prince brought, and says it again for the second prince. And it goes over and over again for the third, fourth, until the 12th. Meaning the Torah repeats again and again all the details of the offering. So the obvious question is, why didn't the Torah just say, this is what the first tribe brought, and this is what the second, and also the third and to 12th tribe brought the same thing? Why does it have to repeat 12 times? This is one of the reasons it makes the laning one of the longest in the one in the Torah. And especially with the different aliyahs and the mishaberachs, you could save 20 minutes in shul if you just said, and this is what the rest of the tribes brought. But that's not what we do. It's easier for Baal Korah because it's the same thing that repeats over and over again. So why does the Torah constantly repeat and say over and over again what the tribes brought? So I want to share an idea I read from Rabbi Ruderman, who was the founder of Ner Israel Rabbinical College, where I was privileged to attend. So he writes there from the Ramban. The Ramban writes, I'll read the Ramban inside. V'od bezeh tam acher b'midrashim ki lekol echad mahanasim. Each one of the princes, alu machshava lehevi chanukah l'mizbeach shtia bezeh hashir. Every tribal leader thought to bring the exact same sacrifice. Avol Nachshon chashav b'shir hazeh tam echad v'zu laso kol echad mahanasim. Nachshon, one of the tribal leaders of Yehuda, the tribal leader of Yehuda, he had a certain intent when he brought the sacrifice. And another tribal leader, he had a different intent. So therefore the Torah writes, again, specifically what each one brought, because even though they brought the same thing, their specific intent was different. Each of the tribal leaders had a different intent, had a different kavanah when they were bringing. And Rav Ruderman says from here, you see that the main part of a mitzvah is the thought that goes into the mitzvah, the inner part of the mitzvah, the panemius, as you would say. Now that doesn't mean the external part of the mitzvah is not as important, is not the main part of the mitzvah. So when you put on tefillin, the main thing is that you think what the tefillin mean, and that I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of tefillin. Now again, that doesn't mean that you can, not put on tefillin, you could put on something else. You still have to follow what the Torah says the mitzvah is, but the main part is the thought. There was, I heard a story once, someone was becoming religious. I think it might have been in Russia, and they don't, without the oral Torah, the Torah just says put a sign between your eyes and on your arm. And a guy walked in, he'd read that in the Torah, and he wanted to, fulfill what the Torah said. So he walked in wearing a little stop sign between his eyes. That's what someone told me. I don't know if it's true, but I could believe it. But you have to wear tefillin. But the main thing, the idea in the tefillin, is to think about what the tefillin means. Is the panemius, the inner thing of the mitzvah. So two people could be doing the same action, Rav Ruderman writes, and one person has intent A, and another person has intent B, and it totally changes the mitzvah for that person, what their intent is. And he says not only that, he says every Shema, there's a mitzvah to read Shema twice a day. But he says the Shema we read on Monday is a different Shema than we read on Tuesday. He says because even though we're doing the same action of reading Shema, every day is different. Every time we daven, even though the words are the same, every day is different and our intent is different. And it has to do with the intent, the kavanah, the panemius of the mitzvah. And he writes, just a related point, which I thought is very interesting. He says that there are many, many reasons for mitzvahs, many inner reasons for mitzvahs, for the commandments, but we don't really grasp most of them. And he brings an example. There is a mitzvah to have a blue string on your tzitzis. Most people don't have that nowadays because it has to be blue from a certain sea creature, and we're not exactly sure what sea creature that is. And the reason is that we have to have that blue is because when one sees the blue, he thinks about the sea, which causes him to think about the sky, which causes him to think about God's throne, which causes him to think about Hashem. So the blue reminds someone to think about Hashem. But the Gemara is clear that the blue string on the tzitzis, the tcheles, has to be from a specific type of sea creature. Well, why can't it just be any blue, right? Let it be any blue. If blue will remind you of the sea and the sky and Hashem, so let it be any blue. Why is it specifically from this sea creature? So he says, you see from here that there are many reasons for mitzvahs and why a mitzvah has to be a specific way. And even though we don't understand it, when you get into the Kabbalah and even things that we'll never understand, there are very deep reasons of why Hashem put things, made the mitzvahs a certain way with certain rules. And there are many, many kavanas, many intents that apply for a mitzvah. It's related, I posted, if you're watching on Facebook, or I'll post it on YouTube also, I posted an article from Rav Aaron Feldman about how it's called Observant but not religious, how unfortunately many of us, when we follow the Torah, we do things by rote, and we don't think about what we're doing. We don't think about the inner meaning of the mitzvahs and how it should change us. So he wrote an article about that. I highly recommend it. I think it's very similar to what Rav Ruderman is saying here, that the main part of a mitzvah is the thought and the intent that we put into it. The external is the external, but we have to try our best to not do mitzvahs by rote, and not be what's called mitzvahs anasha mulmada. It's a very dangerous thing. There's a lot of punishments that happen from that, because Hashem put us here, to change ourselves, and the way we do that is by putting thought and intent and kavana into the way we observe mitzvahs. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out, and have a beautiful day.